Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel for another midweek mystery video. This week we're covering a case that's almost 40 years old, the Burger Chef murders. It was Friday the 17th of November 1978 when 4 employees went missing from a Burger Chef restaurant in Speedway, Indiana. This may seem like a simple case. I don't have loads to tell you and there's not that much in terms of evidence, but I do believe that these 4 employees deserve to have their stories told. Now, if you're not entirely sure what Burger Chef is, I wasn't either. Burger Chef was a chain of restaurants that was quite popular around the USA in the 1960s and 70s. I think it had over 1,000 locations and was second only to McDonald's. It sold out to a different company in the 1980s, but whilst it was open, it was kind of a rite of passage. When you turned 16, a lot of teenagers went and worked there. This particular Burger Chef in Speedway, Indiana, closed on 17th of November at 11 PM as usual. There were 4 employees on the closing shift: 20-year-old assistant manager Jane Freet, 16-year-olds Daniel Davis and Mark Flemons, and 18-year-old Ruth Ellen Shelton. The 4 would have been closing down at the end of their shift, wiping down tables, and they opened the back door to take the bins out. At around midnight, either a fellow employee or a delivery driver, depending on what source you read, that differs, but somebody who knew the restaurant quite well turns up and sees that the back door's open but there's nobody in there. They raise the alarm with the police as this is very strange. Police arrive at the scene and quickly decide that nothing serious happened because there was no sign of a struggle, even though I think it was $581 were missing. All of the tills had been emptied of cash notes, but the change had been left in there. Even though the girls' bags and everyone's coats were left at the restaurant, the police pretty much just said that the teenagers had stolen the money and had gone off partying. And the restaurant wasn't treated like a crime scene. It would have been fully contaminated by the police as soon as they stepped in there, and they just didn't take it seriously from the get-go. And I honestly believe that this one small blunder or one big blunder is the reason why this case is still unsolved today. I get quite a lot of flack on my videos because people say that I'm too harsh on the police, and I just want to clear this up right now. I think the police are incredible. Like, I have some good friends who are in the police. I see what kind of work they do, and honestly I think the police as a whole are incredible and I could never do the job that they do. However, I cover unsolved crimes on my channel, and a lot of the time, not all of the time, but a lot of the time, the reason a case goes unsolved is because of police error, whether it's completely accidental or intentional or just something gets missed. Possibly having to criticise the police's actions in some of my videos comes hand in hand with the kind of genre that I cover on here. Most, again not all of the time, but most of the time a case goes unsolved is because a vital clue is missed in the early hours of the investigation, or somebody's just written off as a runaway when they're actually a missing person and something more sinister has happened. This isn't me saying I hate the police. I think the police are incredible. It's one of the hardest jobs in the world. But like I said, sometimes it just comes hand in hand with what I do. And of course, I cover solved cases on my channel as well, and pretty much every single time a solved case is figured out, it is due to amazing police work. Like, I just want to make it clear that I am not a police hater. I think the police are incredible most of the time. But you're always going to have corrupt cops. In any profession, you're going to have corrupt people, and people are going to make mistakes. And sadly, sometimes it is the difference between a human life and death. Police obviously always want to solve a crime. It's their job, it's what they are meant to do, but human error, they do make mistakes, and in this particular case, they made a pretty huge mistake. The next morning, the 4 families start to voice their concerns that none of their children came home from work the previous night. And then Jane's Chevrolet Vega was found abandoned in town. Alarm bells started to ring for everyone involved. And of course, that same morning when everyone was freaking out, the morning employees arrived at the Burger Chef restaurant and see that the place hasn't been cleaned from the night before. So they just get on with it. They do their job and they clean the restaurant, potentially wiping away any evidence or DNA alongside that. Who knows how different this case would have ended up if the police had just done a forensic sweep. The next day, on Sunday, November 19th, hikers are out in the rural woods of Johnson County. They come across 4 bodies clad in the orange and brown Burger Chef uniforms. Police arrive at the scene quickly and find Ruth Shelton and Daniel Davis lying side by side, having been shot in the back multiple times, execution style. They were shot with a .38 caliber gun. Jane Freet was found lying meters away, having been stabbed in the chest twice with a knife. Later in the autopsy, they found the blade of the knife still inside her, but the handle has never been found. Mark Flemons wasn't found that close to the scene of the others. He was found about 68 metres away. It seemed like he'd made an attempt to escape from his captors, running through the night in the pitch black, before being hit by a low-hanging tree branch. He suffered a blunt force head injury and actually choked to death on his own blood because he fell downhill. If he'd actually fallen in a different direction, they're pretty sure that he probably would have survived. He was very bruised, and it seemed like he'd been beaten about 1 to 2 hours prior to his death. He was the only one of the 4 to have these kind of marks on him, and they think he was actually beaten with a chain. Now, with Mark Flemons being the only person of colour of the group, you can't help but wonder if this beating was racially motivated. The leading theory over the years has been that it was a botched robbery. A group of men, they estimate 4 or 5 different men, break into the Burger Chef restaurant to steal the money, but actually realise that they know one of the people there. A lot of people say that it was actually Jane Freet that they probably recognised, because she actually worked at a different Burger Chef restaurant in Plainsfield, and she'd only recently moved over to Speedway. So the theory is that these men break into the restaurant and recognise Jane, not having expected to see her there, and they panic, they don't know what to do, so they take the 4 and they murder them. They're in a rush, they only take the cash from the registers and they put the 4 in Jane's car. They drive to another location where there's a getaway car waiting, and then they drive the 30+ miles to Johnson County. Interestingly, on the route from the Burger Chef in Speedway to the rural woods where they were found in Johnson County, they passed a lot of other wooded areas, lots of gravel pits, lots of places where they could have done what they did. It seems odd that they would risk driving so far, it's about a 40-minute drive, with these 4 people being held captive in a car, and pass by so many other areas where they could murder them. I think they knew exactly where they were headed, leading me to think they were actually quite familiar with the area around Johnson County. Now, I don't actually know how much I personally agree with this robbery theory. I mean, it makes sense, but there's also parts of it that don't quite sit right with me. There's just a big leap from robbing a fast food restaurant to mass murder. I mean, obviously they're both crimes and they're both wrong, but there's a big difference between robbery and murder. It just seems more calculated to me. Obviously, we don't actually know what went down in the restaurant, but they knew to take Jane's car, they knew to drive to Johnson County, they knew what they were doing. That's what it seems like to me anyway, and of course it's just me theorising. And even if one of the employees did recognise one of the men, it just doesn't seem smart to kidnap and murder all 4 of them. There's other options. You blackmail, you just leave, you just hurt the one employee, or maybe by that point they were just like, they've all seen us, our cover's blown, we've got to kill them all. Like I said earlier, it's speculated there are like 4 or 5 different men involved, so how could all of them be comfortable with cold-hearted murder? And there was also 3 different types of murder here. We have Daniel and Ruth, who were shot in the back, Jane was stabbed in the chest, and Mark, although his death is most likely accidental, he was beaten with chains prior to that. Why not just murder them all in the same way? I mean, it's possible that they tried to, and then Jane runs and Mark runs, so they just got to do what they got to do, but I don't know, there's just something about it that seems more personal to me. But of course, that's my own opinion and I'm probably completely wrong. One of the main problems I had with researching this case is there is so little public information about this. So little. It's quite an old case, which means it's hard to find sources anyway, but it just doesn't seem like the police ever really released that information, and that's if the police even had that information to begin with. Rumour has it, before the forensic experts arrived at the scene, the police actually moved the bodies, and this could have harmed the investigation hugely. Investigators scoured the area for hours, days, with metal detectors, by hand, looking for any clues that they could find, and they couldn't find anything. And this case was further confused by the abductions happening in Marion County and the murders happening in Johnson County. There was kind of a disconnect between the 2 police departments, and there must have been some miscommunication. The Burger Chef murders also happened around the time of another serious crime that happened in Speedway, Indiana. This is the Speedway bombings, a series of 8 different bombings that happened in September 1968, so just 2 months beforehand. And of course people immediately assumed that the 2 crimes were linked. Luckily, the Speedway bombings only led to 2 non-fatal injuries and nobody died. For ages, people just assumed that the 2 crimes were linked, but in 1981 somebody was actually convicted of the Speedway bombings, and it was sort of proven that they weren't linked at all to the Burger Chef murders. There was one major lead that came forward out of the investigation. A 16-year-old boy and his girlfriend said that they'd seen two men sitting in a car just outside the Burger Chef restaurant very near closing time. These men were both white and they were youngish, in their 30s. One man had a thick beard and the other was clean shaven with fair coloured hair. To this day, these are two of the biggest suspects in the case, and they're known as the bearded man and the fair-haired man. The teenagers obviously worked with the police to create composite sketches of these two men, and the police later had these sketches transformed into 3D clay busts. And these are really creepy looking. These busts are so weird, but they've actually been sat in the Speedway Police Department for years. From what I can gather, these busts are still sat in the police station today. Eventually, another lead came forward. A man walked into a bar in Greenwood and started bragging that he had committed the Burger Chef murders. Of course, the police pull him in for questioning and he passes a polygraph test, saying that he didn't do it and he was just bragging. But he does say that he knows who did do it, and he gives the police names of several different suspects, all of whom are involved in a fast food robbery ring. So the police go to find these suspects, and they do, and more. One of the names that was given was that of a man that we'll call the Shotgun Man. The police go to this man's house, interview him, and I'm not entirely sure what happened with the interview, but as they're leaving, they're driving down the street and they see a man with a beard. And one of the police officers turns to the other and says, "That looks exactly like the bearded man." And the other police officer agrees. It was a dead ringer. He was identical. So they interview him, and this man has no alibi whatsoever. But the police also have no evidence against him. This is the problem. The police messed up the crime scene. They got nothing from it. So they've got no evidence whatsoever. Police decide to do a lineup so they can get the teens who saw the men in the car park to identify this bearded man. But very weirdly, this man had had his beard for 5 years. The night before the lineup, he shaves it off. So he goes in, does the lineup, and of course they can't recognise him. The police are pretty much convinced this bearded man is the one they saw, but again they've got no evidence that the bearded man who sat outside the restaurant in the car had anything to do with the murders. All they know is that he was near the scene of the crime. That's it. From what I can read, the fair-haired man was also later found and picked up, but he was sent to jail on a different fast food robbery incident. This fair-haired man was one of the suspects named by the Greenwood man. Honestly, this case is so old, there's very limited information on the internet, so although I can find the big details out about this case, I really can't get all the nitty-gritty details. The Shotgun Man was also later sent to jail as well for multiple robberies involving a shotgun. I would be interested to know if this gun was the same type that was used to murder Ruth Shelton and Daniel Davis. Prosecutors actually offered plea bargains to the fair-haired man and the Shotgun Man, saying that they would get lesser sentences if they could provide information about the Burger Chef killings, but of course they both refused. But why would they give this information? It's either go to jail for a few years on robbery related charges or go to jail for life on mass murder. These men were released from prison and they both still live in Indiana. Years later, the bearded man died of a heart attack, and his son actually came forward saying that before his dad died, he confessed to the Burger Chef killings. But the police can't prosecute a dead man and there's still no evidence whatsoever. The Greenwood man who named the suspects later committed suicide. In 1996, an inmate in jail for sexual assault confesses to the crime, saying that he did them, but the police didn't really pay much attention to this and it was pretty much put down to attention seeking. And as far as I can see, there's actually nothing to link this guy at all. They think he was just trying to brag in jail. The main detectives on the case fully believe that the bearded man, the fair-haired man and the Shotgun Man are all involved in this crime, but they just can't link them. I mean, at least 2 of them have been linked to other fast food robberies. As there's absolutely no evidence in this case, everything is circumstantial and you just can't really get people on circumstantial evidence. There's no DNA, no fingerprints, no nothing. The only thing they could use right now to convict somebody is a confession, and I don't think they're going to get this. I'm pretty sure this case is going to go completely unsolved, even though we kind of know who did it. They were or are looking for 3 pieces of major evidence in this case, and if they find them, possibly it could change the entire investigation, but honestly, this is 40 years old now. So they're looking for the gun that was used to murder Ruth and David, they're looking for the blade handle that was used to murder Jane, and they're looking for the chains that were used to beat Mark. This case remains open today, with new detectives having recently been put on the case, so hopefully a fresh pair of eyes might open up a new lead. There's a $25,000 reward for any information that leads to an arrest. And that's pretty much it. That's the entire case. Can you imagine what a difference it would have made if the police treated the restaurant as a crime scene on the night they first went missing? I think that would have made all the difference. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe there was no DNA left behind and no fingerprints, but we'll never know. If you like this case, I actually covered another one which is very similar called the Yogurt Shop Murders, which I'll link on the end card. So if you want to go watch that, feel free to. I'll be really intrigued to hear all of your guys' theories on this. Do you believe what the police are saying, that it was a botched robbery? Or do you think there are some things that don't quite add up? I'd be very intrigued to know. And I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.